I want to I want to address things a bit cynically, just an introduction. Like in other words, clear. It's a lot of what I'm going to say today is cynical. But I find that comedy, cynicism, dark humor is often a way to bring something across that is not too offensive. So I'm going to role play, if you don't mind, and do some acting. And I'm going to role play a conversation between a person in 2018, sorry, not 18, a person who lived in 1995 and a person alive in 2021. I'm not talking about 5,000 years ago, I'm talking about 25 years ago. So let's round the number, 25 years ago, 1996. So the 1996-year-old, let's imagine her to be young girl, just graduated high school, on the way to college. She just got her first email address, right? Most people didn't have an email address till the mid to late 90s. She got her first email address, still dial-up internet. South Africa is just out of its apartheid. It elected its first government. Russia is in disarray after the collapse of the Soviet Union with Boris Yeltsin. The World Wide Web is coming into form. China is opening up to the world. There's this feeling of optimism. There's a feeling of everything's possible. And then let's have her have a conversation with a graduate of high school who's graduated in 2020 and now first year out of school. And the conversation goes something like this. So just for the sake of clarity, we'll call the first girl from the 1996, we'll call her Sarah, and we'll call the girl from today, Rachel. So Sarah turns to Rachel and says, so how's it in the future? Rachel is, a bit agitated. And Rachel says, it's tough times. Really? Says Sarah. It's tough times. Why? Oh gosh. We're just coming out slowly out of a pandemic. A what? A pandemic. Oh, where do you live? No, I live the same place you live. Really? There's a pandemic? Where's there a pandemic? In India? In China? In Afghanistan? No. There's this everywhere. Really? Okay. So, how's your touring been recently? What touring? There's a pandemic. We don't do touring. You should go to the plains these days. Really, says Sarah. What's wrong with the plains? Oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. You're from 1996. You're before 2001. Oh, going to the airport today is a totally different story, 10 times worse, and the planes aren't any prettier. Really? Oh, and you can't fly anywhere anyway. What happened 2001? Oh, there was this, yeah, never mind. Almost 20 years, the world hasn't been the same. So tell me, says Sarah, how's democracy doing around the world? 1996, it's been feeling so optimistic. Are you kidding me? Russia is pretty much a dictatorship again. China is persecuting minorities. Myanmar is going down the tubes, and I could just go on. And even America has been showing some strange behaviors recently. America, China, Russia, why? What happened? Oh, never mind. So, okay, let me ask another question. How's the abundance doing? 1990s, it's like the best decade. We feel like the world is our oyster. Are you kidding me? The youth are unemployed at rates you cannot imagine. Really? Okay. So geography is not doing too well, I could see. How's Europe? Oh, never mind, Europe. Yeah, Europe in your days seemed to have a future. Now people don't really believe in Europe anymore. Really? What happened now? Never mind. Okay. How's how's Jewish life? I mean, you know, now for the first time in the 90s, all Jews are free. Huh, we're free. We're still free, but anti-Semitism all around the world. It's nasty. Now, I could go on this make-believe conversation, but what's my point? My point is not that life has gotten miserable. It's still beautiful in many ways. But there's no question that the world of 25 years ago and the world today, we seem to have confused ourselves much more than we were 25 years ago. We are a much more confused world. And on first glance, it doesn't make any sense. In the last 25 years, we've had the internet come into our lives. We've had medical technology, we've had smartphones, we've had YouTube, we've had Facebook, we've had Google. I mean, Google was only founded in 1998. Apple only became a real icon, at least the second reincarnation in the late 90s. Facebook didn't exist till the early 2000s. I mean, like 25 years ago, this all didn't exist. Think about it. The top companies in the world, Amazon, that South African fellow from Tesla, Elon Musk, all these guys were non-entities then. Internet banking, the world has changed like you cannot imagine in 25 years. And yet we are much more miserable as the human race than we were 25 years ago. And I'm not even that old, and I remember 25 years ago. I remember, yes, you know, growing up in Crown Heights, 27 years ago, Lubavitch Rebbe passed away, and that was a personal, that was a trauma that we all went through in our community and many people around the world. But if I think of the 90s, I think of the 90s as a time of opportunity, a time of promise. The new millennia, the big worries was, will technology adapt to Y2K, or will we start all over again? Remember those worries that we had in the late 90s, and then year 2000 came and pretty much nothing happened. Do you remember that stuff? That was like this democracy in South Africa, it's gonna work, we're gonna get it right. What happened? What happened? For me, the pandemic is just a cherry on the top of a decline that I see. Again, it's my personal opinion, but I see ever since we entered this millennia, this century, basically since 2000, it's been a decline of meaning, a decline of purpose. So let me paint a picture for you that maybe will offer perspective on this. Until 1990, until the Soviet Union collapsed, I'm talking here with people who remember that, the world was split into two on the most part. There was the West and the non-West, and good and evil were pretty straightforward. For most people in the West, they knew that they were on the side of good, and they saw the other side as evil, and America was fighting a war, a Cold War for 40 years, over 40 years, trying to take down the Soviet Union. But there was somewhat of a clarity on what's right and what's wrong. There were moments like the Vietnam War when things got a bit complicated, the 60s with the hippie movement. But not only from a Soviet West perspective, but even parenting, like parenting started going a bit crazy in the 80s when parenting started becoming, you know, give your kids whatever you want. But for a big part of the second half of the 20th century, there was this clarity, especially after World War II, that there's evil and there's goodness. Nazis are evil. The West is, you know, values are good. And when black and white is clear in somebody's mind, they're able to live in peace. But what happens when black and white are not clear in somebody's mind. What happens when we live in a world in which there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no direction? I remember hearing the analogy, it's like going on an ocean without a compass. You're not free, you're lost. The person going on the ocean, not knowing where they're going, is not free, even though it might think that they're free. I can go wherever I want, but you're lost. That's not freedom. And we have lost the difference, that line between freedom and loss. We are lost. You know, people say there's no leaders today. And I often think to myself, the problem is not that there's no leaders. If there were leaders, we wouldn't follow them if there were good leaders. Because we're not looking for good leaders. We're looking for radicalism as a society. We're looking for simplistic answers. Are we really going to follow somebody that's going to tell us, bring faith into your life, work hard, discipline yourself, parent with values, don't indulge in physicality all day, be bigger, forgive? Those are the leaders we want. There are enough people that are good people out there. I promise you, if this is what we wanted, we would find leaders. I don't believe that we're living in a generation without leaders. I believe we're living in a generation without followers of good leaders. We have a lot of followers of pathetic leaders. We have a lot of followers of leaders who never deserved their title. I was reading an article today that the former chief rabbi in Israel, the Sephardi chief rabbi, Rav Amar, he was talking about all these charlatans and fake Kabbalists who sit there getting people to give them all their money and they just destroy people's lives. There are so many charlatans out there, not because there are charlatans, but because people want them. One of my favorite TED Talks is a 3-minute video where the guy proves that what makes a movement is not a leader, it's the first follower. Because if I decide I'm making a movement and nobody follows me, I'm just an idiot. I'm just a fool. I could sit there screaming. The second I have one follower, think of Christianity. What was JC without Paul? Nothing. What was Muhammad without his first follower? What was Karl Marx without the first person that bought into his ideas? And these are not, some of these leaders were great, some of them not great. What is Mandela if nobody buys into his vision? So yes, the leader has to have a vision, but ultimately people have to buy into it. And today the problem is not that we don't have leaders, it's nobody's buying into it, or not enough people. We're buying into garbage. Think about it. Each and every one person I know has bought into the fact that they should be spending about $1,000 of their money, plus minus, to get one of these. Each of us have bought into the fact that at least for a while, we thought that social media is a positive thing. Each of us bought into the fact that marriage is just one alternative of how to live. Each of us have bought into the fact, and I just read a study yesterday, 1 in 3 couples are deciding not to have any children at all. It's pretty cool, maybe pretty crazy, but we're buying into a lot of bad ideas. And I could just go on and on. Some will get a bit offensive to people. What do you mean that's not a bad idea? That's a great idea. We are at our junction today in 2021, not because of COVID. Yes, COVID expedited things, COVID exasperated things, but we are here because we're lost, because we don't actually know what we're living for. Our grandparents who went through hell and back had more clarity about what life is about than we do. And a big reason is because until the pandemic, on the most part, life was easy. Yes, there were struggles the last 20 years, but it didn't necessarily affect us personally until COVID. COVID was the first thing that for many people that really affected us in a deep, deep, deep way, transformed our life. And suddenly we have to face life's challenges, but this is not what we signed up for. The girl in 1996, Sarah, she thought she signed up for a great life. Most of our kids, when we brought them into the world, we thought we're bringing them into an uncomplicated world. We did not think we're bringing them into a world remotely similar to what we came from or where our parents came from. Not at all. And suddenly the world is looking a bit similar to that. anti-Semitism, hate, radicalism. And you look around and you sit there saying, but this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I signed up for. And I always think about the one line in a book. I don't have it here. Oh yeah, I have it here. The book, The Rebbe. There's a line in the book where somebody was complaining to the Rebbe about how many jobs he has and how many responsibilities he has. And the Rebbe turns to him and says, since when did you sign a contract with God to have an easy life? Now that's a harsh statement, but it's so true. It's so true. I believe that one of the best things that could come out of COVID is when we let go of this myth that we were put into this world to drink martinis on beautiful beaches just next to our private yacht. That is not the ultimate. In other words, we worship people who've made it in life. And what do we call made it? Who live the life. Oh boy, do they live the life. We're all chasing that dream, that beautiful car, that beautiful home, that beautiful immigration to a beautiful place, to a beautiful, oh my gosh, just the life. A life of pleasure. Think about how much of our lives, our money we spend on things to just give us pleasure. Now, pleasure is nice, but it's not a goal. It's a nice pillow to sleep on. In other words, it's a nice accompaniment along the journey, but comfort should never be a goal. What kind of goal is that? I want a life of comfort? Really? That's a goal? Then don't be born in the first place. It's much more comfortable not being born. In the words of our sages, Noach lo shelo nivra. It's better not to be born in the first place. Think about it. If you came into this world for a life of comfort, that was a bad exchange. Why did you have to come here at all? I was talking to a friend of mine who just suffered a terrible loss. And he says, after suffering this terrible pain, I sometimes ask why God put us in this world in the first place if we have to suffer this much pain. I get it. I get it. I don't know why God put us through pain, but one thing I do know is that if I think that life is all about drinking lattes and watching my bank account grow next to my beautiful spouse and beautiful kids and everything's hunky-dory, then I had a bad deal. In the words of the Talmud, it's a mekach tos. It's a buying that was done blindly. In other words, I didn't know what I was getting into. We weren't born to have fun. We were born to make an impact, to live a life of meaning, to love, to be loved, to grow, to learn, to value, to struggle, to overcome our impulses. We were born to fight the inner fights within, to wage a battle each and every day against the darkness within us, the darkness that tries to get us to do stupid things, the darkness that gets us to hate, to hold a grudge, the darkness that gets us to be selfish, the darkness that gets us to be impulsive, the darkness that gets us to stray where we're not supposed to stray. That is what we're here to do. We're here to add light by doing acts of goodness and kindness, making an impact on people's lives, on our life. We're here to raise a family, to do the best we can. We're here to struggle. Adam la'amal yulad. We were born into this world to fight, to struggle. And to the girl of 1996, to Sarah, what I would say is, you better change your narrative quick. Otherwise, you will have no way of coping in 2021. I'm not saying a person has to be morbid, but a person, we have to learn from the people that came before us, generations before us, who knew this intrinsically because they were born into a much darker world than we were. That life is not here for fun. And life is not here to chase your dreams and to make a success out of yourself. That's nice. Most of our ancestors didn't make major successes out of themselves. and they still lived lives a million times more meaningful than many people today. My grandparents never made a success, but gosh, what a success they were. They never built a career and made it, and became famous, became an influencer, made partner in the business, married the perfect person, and raised the perfect family that posted perfect pictures on Facebook. None of that. Not at all. But I don't think the word success even entered them. It was just live a good life, live a life of values. Good doesn't mean pleasurable. Good means goodness. Have a good life. Fight the good fight. I was reading today an article about how America seems like it's never going to be the same, even though most of the masks are away and people are moving on in their lives. It's like a different world they're walking into. It's a much more pessimistic world. It's a much more cynical world. But why? Compared to history, what we went through in this pandemic is a joke. Think of the pandemic of 19, I'm not saying a joke, it's the pain was real. Yeah, I'm saying, but compared to history, they would say, okay, fine, that happens. Every so often there's a pandemic. But did you see World War I? Did you see World War II? Did you see the pandemic of 1918? But we, thank God, didn't grow up in these times. We grew up in a time of fun. We, as people love to describe the South Africa of old, we just rode our bikes around without fear. And suddenly we're feeling feelings like fear and paranoia and hate. And what do you do with that? Do you give up? Do you just turn your whole perspective of life from an optimistic, sweet to negative and dark? I know I said I'm going to start this year dark. Hope I didn't go too dark or too cynical. But I find the conversations I'm having, the way I'm talking, the way people are talking to me, we've lost some of our mojo. We've lost some of that luster, that bluster, that light. But the truth is, the light that we had 2 years ago wasn't real. It was just based on a myth, and that is that life is fun and games. Now we could develop a new light, a light that says, yes, life is tough, but it's still so beautiful and so worth it and so valuable. And every moment of this life, as imperfect as it is an absolute gift. We should not be the shallow people we were 2 years ago. We should not go back to that, because as a society, maybe not as individuals, many individuals are deep, but as a society, we were very shallow. This, money, pleasure, fun, TV, binge watching, business careers, shallow. Shallow, not learning, not growing in our character, becoming addicted to any single thing, overeating, overspending. I'm not criticizing others, I'm looking at myself. As Brené Brown says, we're the most over-medicated, overweight, over-anxious, obese cohort in human history, because life was so good and we didn't know how to deal with good life, so we just drowned in it. Now life, a bit of the carpet has been pulled from beneath us, a bit, and the question is, can we now live a more grounded life, get our values back? Sometimes you have a child who's having a tantrum. I know, don't say I do this, but sometimes you just have to shake the child, not hard, you don't hit them, but you have to like get the child, just like calm down. Having a meltdown, you just have to like, okay, kid, we're gonna hold you now and we're gonna calm down. We've been having, as a society, a big tantrum for the last many decades. I would say it started from the 60s, but especially in the last 2-3 decades. Just a tantrum, do what you want, free love, free spending, do what you want, live the life, tour the world, baby, just do it. Eat, party, be merry, tomorrow we die. And Hashem has taken us by our head like a little child and saying, calm down. Could you stop with the tantrum, this entitlement, the meltdown? Ground yourself. Let's go back. I had a funny story in my home last week on Friday night. Chaya was asking the kids, she says, why were the Jews kvetching in the desert? What were they complaining about? So one of the kids says they were complaining. Why were they complaining? Because they didn't have water. The next kid says because they didn't have food. The next one says because Aaron died and this and that. And finally my wife says, okay, and why else? Why else were they complaining? And one of the kids says, because they didn't take their meds. That was just a funny moment. And I think to myself, as a society, we need to take our meds. Phew, just calm down. Calm down. Anchor. We are freaking out. And nothing good happens out of a freak out. Nothing good happens out of a meltdown. Nothing good happens out of over-anxiety. Nothing good comes from a dark place. Yes, life is not pretty. It's tough. We're going through tough times. People are dying. People are sick. People are struggling financially. People are lonely. People are sad. We get it. But no, don't melt down. Hold it together. I'm talking to myself. We have to hold it together. Hold it. Remember. Yes, this is God's world, and He's in control. And we never signed up for a perfect life, but it's still beautiful, and there's still incredible moments of love and life and laughter in this difficult time. There is. It's there. It's fully there. Embrace it. Don't let this overwhelm us. Let's be able to look back at this time. Once we're out, please God, in a few months, we're vaccinated, we can go to some sort of normal. Let's look back at this time with gratitude on this, with pride of what it's done to us. Let's not be reinvented to be lesser people than we were. Let's reinvent ourselves to be a much better version than we were in March 2020. Because then, and only then, can we offer meaning to the crazy thing we've been through. So from Rachel to Sarah, they're both wrong. Sarah's in denial. Rachel is too dark. Life is beautiful, and it's tough, and it's not a contradiction. And everyone who's ever walked the face of the earth has known it. And it's about time we learned it as well.